So this episode includes open and honest conversations about sensitive topics, including suicidal ideation, addiction, and other forms of emotional distress. These themes may be activating for some listeners, so please take care of yourself while listening, or feel free to skip this episode because it's a heavy one. Okay, with that said, let's get into our episode.
Welcome to Better Mental Health, a podcast for men looking to build a resource and community around destigmatizing men's mental health. I'm Blake.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm Blair. In this episode, we are joined by my cousin Nate Landingham, who is a producer and musician in Austin, Texas. He goes by Nathaniel Earl on Spotify, so look him up. Nate and I caught up a few months back, and I immediately thought about bringing him onto the podcast to chat about his mental health journey, which includes things like addiction, suicidal ideation, family dynamics, and much more. Nate graciously agreed to this no-holds-barred conversation on these really difficult conversation topics. So with that in mind, let's get right into it. Nate, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Well, we were talking about maybe the first thing we could jump into is you also grew up in Christian Science.
I did. And I'm still here.
How indoctrinated were you? Were you like bought in fully as a kid, or was it?
It was gradient. There was definitely an era where it was hardcore. I remember getting a brown recluse bite up at the family cabin, the kind of extended family cabin that we all have in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We've been there. Oh yeah. Oh cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome. I was fishing in some waders that had been sitting on the hook for maybe 400 years, and must have been a brown recluse nest in there.
Jeez.
And got bit and was very much just like, let's pray about it. And I'm like, but I'm seeing hallucinations, and I just watched Lord of the Rings for the first time, so I was convinced there were Nazgul out in the field chasing me. And so that was, maybe the more extreme era. And then I think progressively, I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and I think as each new kid was introduced, the idea of let's just pray through this became less and less feasible as a concept. I think it tapered off, and there was more willingness to explore other ideas. By the end of my dad's life, there was like a lot of Eckhart Tolle and different kinds of like a little bit more accessible spiritual concepts that were really proliferated throughout the family sphere. But yeah, it was pretty intense for a while, especially when I was younger. Then when I was 12, I remember being like, I'm gonna read the Science and Health front to back every day.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to get class instruction. I'm going to be like the best Christian scientist that there ever was.
It's like a canon event for anyone raised in Christian Science.
Oh, yeah.
Read the whole Bible and the whole Christian Science. And
I don't know if I ever decided on the Bible, but...
trying to read the Bible, if you can get through Genesis, like that whole begat chapter,
Did you ever actually read Science and Health front to back?
I did, yeah. I remember doing it a few times. There was a period where actually my family moved into Blair and I's grandparents' old house in Leavenworth, and it's about the most isolating city in America. And there's just like no other people under the age of 60 within many miles. And so I would just sit on the back porch and like try to read Science and Health. And if I would like, how when you're reading, sometimes you'll like start thinking about something else and get through the paragraph. You're like, I don't know what I just read. And I'd go back and read it again. Like, no, I need to really absorb this information.
Yeah. And that information, the way that she's presenting it was always like, hold on, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
It's very interpretive.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had some level of buy-in then.
I definitely was bought in when I was younger, but I think it was always this feeling of this doesn't make sense to me, so I'm going to dig as deep as I can and like really, really understand this. But it was always confusing. There were so many contradictions. Like this cancels this out. So how does this work? And there's like this undercurrent truth that I'm trying to get to where maybe like I'll have a healing. I never had a healing. So I was like, I'm just not there yet. I'll get there.
was there a specific moment where you kind of were disillusioned, or was it a gradual process?
Good question. I think there was always a bit of disillusionment, but when I was 17, I ran away from home. Like I decided I was homeschooled, oldest of 8 kids and a Christian Scientist. So there was just a lot of like really strict and rigid and unflexible dynamics. And there was a girl that I had a crush on who was older than me and really beautiful. And I was like, I want to date this girl. And they're like, nope, you can do it when you leave the house. And I was like, okay. So I packed up and left. And I think at that moment, when I started being by myself and thinking for myself completely, I realized like, oh, this absolutely doesn't make sense. So I'm out of it. And then of course, a recruiter for Principia College, where we all showed up, and I was like, no, I can be a Christian Scientist at least for this onboarding process and this grant money, and then
Yeah.
we'll revisit the validity.
Dang, so you ran away. Well,
Yeah, and my first night it was February, and it was sleeting outside, and I had a suitcase with 17-year-old Logic, like my CDs, and like a couple pairs of jeans. And I
Wait,
slept
this
under
girl
a
that you had a
bridge.
crush on, she didn't take you in?
No, she lived with her parents too, and they were Persian, so they were like, you can't date a white guy. So we had to have like a secret relationship, and definitely not taken in. So I slept under a bridge for a few nights, and then I got busted trying to steal some clothes from the mall, and the mall security guards were like, "What's up? Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Well, I'm homeless." And they're like, "Do you want to live with us for a little while?" So I lived with the mall security guards for maybe a month until the truancy officer showed up.
dude, that's
Wow.
Yeah.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, it was an interesting one.
that's some Romeo and Juliet shit. That was
Well, check this out though. She was a aspiring cosmetologist who was going to beauty school, and so she wanted to experiment with me. She was like, "I want to dye your hair and do all this stuff." And I said, "Go for it, sweetheart. I love you." She dyed my hair dark brown and my eyebrows too, and they look small, but they're actually ginormous. And so she dyed them. Woke up the next morning and was like, "I don't think this is gonna work." I'm like, "You have to live with what you did. You can't abandon me after making me look like a monster."
Oh my God.
Yeah. 3 months later, I was a Prin.
3 months later, you're a
Yeah.
Prin?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Wow.
I didn't realize that. Okay. Wow.
So you
Dang.
went from basically homeless to living with strangers to coming to Principia College, living in the dorm room, right?
Right. Well, there was a 4-month period. There was a guy that was at the church, the Christian Science church that I went to here, who took me in, and he was a good guy. Him and his wife. I lived with them for a little while, and then transitioned to Principia.
this whole thing being mental health journey. I'm wondering if we can kind of take it back a little bit. And is there a moment that stands out to you as sort of formative? It could be earlier than what we've been talking about in terms of like shaping your mental health journey, or anything that you think would be a good place to start from your perspective.
When you refer to the mental health journey, there's a couple different elements to my mental health journey. Addiction being one, depression, suicidal tendencies. Is there like a specific channel?
Whatever channel feels like the most natural place to start for you. And
Well, then maybe the state of denial that one has to live in to fully be a Christian Scientist is a good place to start, because I feel like there's this direct contradiction of being a material body and denying a material existence. That kind of like a psychological split that happens as a result was pretty informative to sort of this kind of state of like almost like a self hallucination that I lived in. Also being a musician, there's a bit of this romanticized, not a bit, there's a lot of a romanticized idea of what being a musician is. It's like I just bare my heart, and like everyone will love me for it, and and my grandmother certainly did, but other than that, I ran into some resistance on the admiration that I always hoped and dreamed I would have.
What do you mean by that? Like from your family?
Yeah, from everybody. I mean, there were a few people that were like, "Nate, you're so wonderful at what you do," and everyone else was like, "I don't really care that you're a musician. Like, who cares? When are you going to grow up and take yourself seriously?"
sure.
Mm.
And many of my partners over the years were like very impressed by the music until they became my partner and were like, "Whoa, when are you going to settle down and start a family with me and get a real job?" It's like, well, you mean the sales pitch was pretty clear out the gate, But I think, to return to your question, the kind of dual state of existence became a real thing for me, and I definitely felt that I had two different imaginary realities. One being this like very romanticized idea of what my life was supposed to look like, where I was going to arrive at certain points along my music career. I was going to have a band, and I was going to somehow like get discovered and be famous and be rich and like have everything that I want. And then there was this other side, which is equally as imaginary, which was that everything was hopeless and nothing mattered. And without the positive imaginary reality manifesting, the negative reality was it. There was no like middle ground. There was just
binary.
Yeah, exactly. Very binary. And so I think depression was something that I experienced a lot of, because that negative state was very negative, and there's a lot of self-hatred, self-loathing, insecurity.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the most obvious destination of that is addiction, right? Because to be in a state of pretty active addiction like I was, where, you know, you're drinking and using drugs on a daily basis, there's a state of a denial there too, much like the getting a brown recluse bite and being like, this is just going to go away. You know, it's like I'm drinking a bottle of vodka today and spending all the rest of the money that I have on cocaine or whatever it is. But like, this is just for today, you know?
Did you have anybody to talk to during these times? Was there anybody that you felt like you could open up to or share, or was it a lonely experience?
There definitely were. I think there's a lot of commiserating that happened in the community I was in, because, you know, a lot of my contemporaries in the music space and a lot of the people that I worked with at the time, I had a AV company. A lot of the people that I worked with were also alcoholics, and, you know, we'd get off work, we'd go to the bar, and we'd spend $150 and be like, man, we're gonna make it through this. You know, tomorrow maybe let's go for a run. Let's find some traction together. So there was the ability to express collaborative misery, but I don't know that there was necessarily like any productive, helpful relationships for processing those grievances.
Right.
Yeah.
Did try therapy a few times, but I was also like, my view of therapy was very much like Leo DiCaprio in The Departed therapy, where you go in and you're just like, there's no point to this, but maybe you'll fall in love with me.
Yeah.
I only wanted female therapists for that reason.
Oh yeah, to see how dark and brooding you were.
Yeah, exactly.
You said you were commiserating with your contemporaries in the music space. So was it like, we all know that we have our own addictions that we're dealing with, and people were saying, oh, well, we're going to get through this? Or was it more like, once we kind of make it, whatever that means to us, then all these problems that we're kind of like numbing with drugs and alcohol, those go away?
A little bit of both. And I think also a little bit of a positive thing, which is really living in the present moment. And being like, you know what, let's just really be present here together. Let's enjoy this decision that we made, and let's commit to like trying to do better tomorrow. We're already in it. We're already 10 shots deep. Like, we're already on the way to the dealer's house. You know, like, I remember so many drives to the drug dealer's house being like the conversation for what tomorrow was going to look like and how much better it was going to be. So you know, maybe the silver lining of it all was being in active addiction was an exercise of really aggressively accepting the present moment, but also heavily denying the future. So it wasn't all silver lining.
And while you were in the throes of the active addiction, that's when you were trying the therapy route?
Yeah, I think in 2017, I was maybe a year and a half married, and my addiction was really heavy, and I started having suicidal ideologies. And so I started doing therapy. My routine was to go to therapy on Monday around 3 or 4 and get out and feel so shaken by facing the sort of the darkness that I would just go to the bar and get extra fucked up that night. Sorry. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah,
words on
totally.
here?
Oh, yeah.
Should have asked that first. I'm sure you guys have experienced this to some degree too, but when you first decide to start accepting and looking at the darkness, it becomes darker for a little while, because you're sort of opening the door to the compartmentalized part of yourself.
Yeah.
So it was probably the darkest portion of my experience was when I first started therapy, because also there's a tendency in the community to bypass certain information. So like, I'm coming in saying, hey, I'm daily consuming alcohol and using cocaine, which is like an upper or like a stimulant and a depressant. And I was also seemingly very bipolar. And so they were like, let's put you on these meds, but these meds are also extremely dangerous to drink on. And so my brain got kind of thrown into this crazy space, you know, where I was like regularly coming to in environments I didn't remember arriving at. But the desire to prescribe and increase dosages was very prevalent. And looking back on it now, I'm like, it would have been helpful for you to recognize that there wasn't any real desire to stop the addiction. Then prescribing this dangerous chemical to mix with this addiction is a bad move.
Yeah.
Not blaming those individuals.
Yeah, I think that goes to show sort of like the dangers and the potential for harm in the therapy space too. And was this a psychologist that you were seeing specifically? Do you remember who it was like?
It was a combination of a therapist and a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Like, the therapist referred me to the psychiatrist prescribed me the medication.
Yep.
We've talked about in other conversations, maybe just with the three of us, maybe with a guest, I can't remember, but like some of the things that maybe keep people from going to therapy. And I don't know that that's actually one of the ones that we addressed in that conversation. There can be, you know, some over medication or seeing your symptoms, and these are the things that I think you should be taking. I think that might be a fearful place for a lot of people. And coming from Christian Science too, I don't know if that was something that you experienced when you first started taking pills, but like I didn't take a pill until I was 24, 25.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of fear, you know, having like, I had meningitis and I was like terrified of taking Tylenol to alleviate the pain, you know? But meanwhile, I'm like actively dying. And finally took one, was like, oh my God, I can't believe I haven't done this sooner.
Yes. That was the exact
It's like magic
thing that happened.
Well, actually, the first thing I took was ibuprofen, and I am apparently pretty allergic to ibuprofen. News to me since, you know, I never took it when I was younger. So I'm sitting there like, and my insides are swelling up, and I'm like, this doesn't, like, I never should have taken medicine. This is why.
Oh my gosh.
Christian Science said we shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But it's because I was having like anaphylactic shock, you know?
Yeah.
Jeez. Nate, if you don't mind going there, I wanted to ask you about like the patterns. You mentioned suicidal thoughts that you would have. Was there like a pattern that would sort of like trigger this? Was this a daily occurrence, or would it be like if something specific happened, you would kind of get pushed into those thoughts?
I definitely think the combination of the alcohol and the cocaine was a part of it, because your brain is just getting stretched into these crazy spaces. And then when those things leave your body, you're kind of left with this like vapid black hole feeling. And for me, it wasn't sadness or depression per se that led to the suicidal ideations. It was the feeling of like a dissipation of soul, if that makes sense. Because I've had a lot of really dark moments in my life that affected me deeply, but they didn't lead me to want to end my life. The spaces where I felt that compulsion, or when it felt as if my life had sort of been involuntarily pulled away. The last time that I had a suicidal ideation was the last night that I drank. I was in this room. It was right after I'd moved here. And I remember feeling, it almost felt as if like, I can't describe it other than this way, but it felt as if my soul was sort of like disintegrating. And I felt like I was disappearing into nothingness, but not the nothingness that they talk about in death, where it's like this peaceful arrival at, you know, this nirvana state or something. It was like, oh no, I'm disappearing and then I'll be gone completely. And I think maybe in a weird way, the desire for suicide in that space was sort of like if I'm going out, like I'm going out on my own terms, and maybe like I can like rip the control back and start over, or whatever it might be, or just escape the feeling of disappearing. But I definitely think the drugs and alcohol were a big part of that pattern. And I definitely had some trauma from some past relationships, even a pretty violent relationship that filled my head with a specific level of self-loathing that was very loud. And so this feeling of the world would be better served if I was no longer a part of it. Like there was this feeling of almost like I was a parasite for my relationships, and that I would be, you know, sucking sustenance or life from the situations I was in. And so it felt like a martyrdom thing to remove myself from these situations in order for them to continue to move forward on their own.
Wow. That feeling that you're describing, was there a somatic aspect of it? I feel like something that I'm noticing that I'm interested in exploring with men specifically is kind of getting in touch with their somatic experience. I don't know if you have a lot of experience in that. And I think, again, going back to the Christian Science upbringing, we had spent so much time like ignoring the body, the physical body, the like somatic experience. And like when you were describing this, like, well, you did a good job with like this soul kind of dissipating. During all of the things that you're describing, is some experience of your like physical body coming to mind in those moments?
Absolutely. Yeah. Has anybody here ever had a panic attack or anxiety attack?
Yes. Yeah.
So that feeling of acceleration and kind of like involuntary vibration, I don't know how to describe it other than that, but it's this like uncontrollable panic that is agonizing, but not agonizing in the same way that like a cut or a burn is, but it's like in your bloodstream or something. That feeling absolutely played a part, because the sort of that accelerated state of despair that comes from the drugs leaving your body leave you with this like really heightened sense of fear and panic. And that was absolutely a stimulus for like, I just need an off switch, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Usually it was trying to find more, because the best off switch is to numb it further. But occasionally, after a few days in a row, like, there is no more that would make it better. And it was like, maybe a more permanent off switch would be the solution here.
Right. It sounds like that was the last time, and there was a catalyst after that sort of forced you to choose the other direction or choose sobriety. Is that right? Or is there like a wake up call there?
It was progressive. The first time that I tried to get sober, well, there were many, many times that I tried to get sober, but the first time I really put some effort in was in 2019. I went to rehab. And at that point, I had very much distanced myself from Christian Science and spirituality in general. I was like a profound atheist. I didn't even care enough to be an atheist. It was just sort of like orbiting my own self. I became my own God, because I'm like a musician, and I'm like struggling to make the thing happen. And like every ounce of energy that I had would just get recontributed into myself and my experience. So I didn't have time to think about God or spirituality or whatever. But then I went to rehab, and I had a month and a half like really unplugged from the rest of my life. And this rehab wasn't a 12-step rehab, which I don't know if y'all are familiar with the 12-step program, but they definitely, I'd say they leaned that direction. So we went to a lot of 12-step meetings, and I had to get a sponsor. And one of the steps, or the very first step, is like admitting it's unmanageable. And then the second step is basically asking God for help, whatever God may be. And I got to that step, and I was like, well, this isn't going to work, because, I don't believe in God. And there was a night where I'm sitting in a bed, and the guy next to me is, coming off of meth and peeing himself. It was a very similar feeling to that soul disappearing feeling of like, I can't escape this, and it's so agonizing. There was also this feeling of, well, at least I'm trying to do something about it. And so I pushed a little bit further into that, and I was like, well, maybe I'm just going to try to understand this God thing, because it seems to work for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So in AA, they have the serenity prayer, which is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And everything made sense in that prayer except for God. So I was like, maybe I'll sit here and like, I'll say each word of this prayer until it makes sense to me. And the first word was God. So I'm like, okay, I'll be here for a while. But I just sat in that bed and repeated God over and over again for about 2 hours. And then right at the end of that 2-hour period, all of a sudden I sort of had this clarity of what God meant to me. And it was more of this like universal ecosystem, this sort of like vibrational field that moves in and amongst everything. And it's almost like I was on mushrooms or something, and I could see like these frequencies moving through the air. And I felt connected to everything, even this guy next to me who was sleeping in his own urine. And I felt a lot of peace from that. So that was maybe the real catalyst for sobriety, because after I left rehab, I started drinking again, and didn't really get back into active drug use, but drinking became pretty intense. And when I decided to finally get sober completely off of alcohol, I had that to pull from. Like it wasn't like I was starting from nothing. There was this foundation that had slowly built up. And my dad had died a couple years before that, and that experience also gave me a little bit of like an adulting moment where I realized that there were other people that needed my help. So I had started to really be involved in my family dynamic, because I'd ever since I left the house when I was 17, I sort of stayed out of the family stuff. That's what I mean by it's progressive. There was like some benchmarks or checkpoints along the way that led to that final moment of, okay, this really is unmanageable, but I also have a little bit of a footing to see what life could look like free of this continual self-destructive tendency.
Nate, I wanted to ask you, I don't know, just from your own experience or maybe other people who have faced drug addiction, alcohol addiction, kind of in your sphere as well. You hear a lot about like people kind of needing to hit a rock bottom point before they make that turn and find a path that can kind of get them out of it. Is that the experience you would describe it as, like a rock bottom point, or not quite so much? And would you say that you've seen others go through kind of the same path?
Yeah, I think rock bottom comes with a specific kind of image, like your darkest moment. Like hypothetically, my rock bottom would have been trying to commit suicide, getting taken to the psych ward. That feels like a rock bottom experience. Or like I had a few other experiences that were objectively like as dark in terms of like a narrative, right? But the actual rock bottom for me looked a lot more docile narratively. Like it was just being in this room and realizing for whatever reason, like, oh, I actually will die, like not just my physical body, but however many lifetimes I've lived, like whatever progress I've made over this life or past lives or whatever, like those are all going to go away, and I'm just going to have to restart if I get the chance. What was more important for me than having a rock bottom experience was having an ego death, like a complete and absolute ego death. And what I mean by ego death is being able to completely separate from ego and look at my experience objectively and realize that the way that I'm operating is malfunctioning. It's like the transmission's busted in the car. Like you can't just like swap out the transmission real quick. I mean, you can, but you know, the car's not going to work the same. Just needed to get a new car. I don't know if that analogy makes sense.
No, yeah, it does.
Transmissions are expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, if you take your car in to get a transmission repair, they're like, well, I mean, we opened this thing up. It's not really going to work the same. It's just got to get a new one.
If you don't mind, I want to kind of get into your relationship with your family too. You obviously mentioned your dad passing a couple of times. How old were you when that happened?
I think I was 32, about to turn 30, because he passed like a week before I turned 33, I think. So 32, 33, something like that.
Yeah, so pretty recently. Actually. What was your relationship like with your dad up until his passing?
My relationship with my dad was constantly shifting. You know, growing up, there was a lot of beautiful moments and there was a lot of awful moments. And then obviously I ran away from home and he was not stoked about that. So it was tense for a while. One thing I respect about my dad is that he was constantly trying to evolve his perspective. I think, unfortunately, he passed before he had his own ego death. And because the direction he was moving, I feel confident that like he was pretty close to some enlightenment. And my mom, for example, has, you know, I really admire and respect the way that she's moved through her experience, especially since my dad has passed, and has really taken to heart this feeling of like, it doesn't matter where I am in my life timeline, like there's always room to grow, there's room to improve, there's room to evolve. So with my dad, I think right before he died, I was drinking a lot, but we had started having phone conversations during COVID where I'd like sneak off to the liquor store, get a bottle of vodka, go sit in the park, give him a phone call. And, you know, the first couple of hours of drinking are always pretty great. It's later after that where it's you're not as communicative or more depressed, but the conversations that we would have were great. And I was working on some music that I wanted him to be involved with, and he was working on an album. And so we'd have a lot of conversations about creation and working in a studio and composition, things like that. The very last conversation I had with him was him expressing some doubt and fear about beginning to perform again after COVID. And I was able to kind of prop him up and be like, no, you got this, man. You're awesome. You know, you're my hero. And then like a couple days later he passed. So like I definitely didn't feel the like, oh, there's so many things left unsaid, or, you know, I wish that we had the redemption arc. Like I would have loved for him to have seen who I am today, because I'm a substantially better person. But I guess I felt pretty at peace with the way things ended as they ended.
He passed unexpectedly?
Yeah, I think he kind of knew he was going to pass. He referenced not feeling like he was going to live very much longer a few times, but it still happened spontaneously, just one day in the backyard while he was working.
Yeah. Like I was just starting to like reconnect with your dad. We did watch parties on Amazon. One movie that he like really wanted us to see. Yeah, I think the thing that I did admire about him was like this openness to new ideas, because I was dealing with my issues with my mom at the time of like not recognizing any openness whatsoever, like extremely closed-minded. I had seen that your dad had done kind of not a 180 fully, but he was like fully bought in on Christian Science to the point of like brown recluse biting his child and being like, we'll pray about it. Towards the end, you know, I think he had mentioned, you know, he came to visit and then was telling us about he had a heart attack at the gym, finished his workout apparently. So he did go like the medical route and like took care of himself in that way. So I just had admired that part of him, of like being open to new ideas and really taking care of his physical body when it started to talk to him in specific ways.
He did drive home from the gym mid heart attack to go try to print out the insurance card. So like maybe he took it too far the other way, you know?
Yeah.
Still had like a methodology, a checklist. that had to be
Yeah.
migrated
Wow.
through before resolution. But
I loved hearing that like there's doesn't feel like there's a lot unsaid, because like when my dad died, I was also 24 at the time. Yeah, 24. So I was like not anywhere near the, fully realized, man or adult that I kind of am more so today. The fact that you don't feel a lot of there's things left unsaid, I like that feels really amazing to hear.
thanks, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're the oldest of 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And were you close with any of your other siblings like up until this point? Did that event kind of like bring you back into the fold with your family and other siblings? I'm just wondering, like, what was your relationship like with everyone else in your family?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, my mom called me and said, your dad's dead. And it was like a switch flipped that was like, oh, okay, now my role is to show up for the family. And a process of figuring out what that looked like healthily, because I think part of it was this is a task for me, as opposed to like this is an offering for them. But it did activate a lot of relationships. Like I grew closer with all of the members of my family. My mom and I don't know that we weren't not close, but we just didn't talk very much. And, we talk all the time now. We consider each other friends before we consider each other mother and son, which is really cool. And my younger brother, Luke, came and lived with me for a while, which was really fun. I had regular phone calls with multiple members of my family weekly for a couple of years. Just recently, I've sort of had to kind of create a little bit of space, some boundaries, not because of anything anybody did, but just, if I'm having an hour-long phone call with every member of my family, like I just don't have time for anything else,
Yeah.
That's a
And I-
full-time job right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and also the boundary setting is sort of an act of recalibration of those relationships too, because we have like wartime and peacetime functions for ourselves and our relationships, which is like there's crisis. This is like the wartime approach. I'm gonna like put everything on hold and really show up for you. And then there's peacetime where that doesn't really work anymore. Like putting everything on hold to show up for people that don't really need it and aren't really asking for it is only just taking away from my own experience and probably creating some just an unhealthy, I wouldn't say dependency, 'cause I never felt like anybody was dependent by any means, but it's kind of like the relationship that a parent has with their kid when the kid's an adult and they're like, I don't know, what do you need? Like, can I bring you some food? And you're like, just give me some space, that's really what I need. But I mean, long way of saying that, yes, it definitely kind of like reactivated and transformed the relationships with my family members for sure.
I'm curious how your journey and your, difficulty with mental health struggles, how that influenced your music at all, or how creating music was a way of, or if it was a way of kind of dealing with the things that you were struggling with at the time.
Well, it's funny. It used to be the opposite. It used to be like a diary entry of misery that, I would document these awful experiences through song, and then I would have to relive those experiences constantly. Like I'd write a song about like the worst thing that ever happened, and then 3 weeks later I'd feel fine, but I'd have to perform that song every week, And so music became kind of a trauma activator for a while. And it wasn't until just a couple of years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, that I finally realized that I needed to stop doing that. Like I wasn't going to stop writing songs about heartbreak, because the music that I make is very much about expressing emotion. There are people who are amazing guitarists. There are people who are like brilliant lyricists. There are people who are great producers. My strength is like evoking emotion. So that theme couldn't be pulled out of the music, but it had to be transformed. And then it did become a cathartic experience, because what I realized was if I started working on the piece, realizing that this was something that I wanted to share in perpetuity, then it just changed. It just kind of like shifted by like just a few degrees the way that I would present it, the way that I would capture it. And it became a way to process the things I was going through. Like a couple of years ago, I had a relationship that was really serious, and we were about to get engaged, and she got ill, and things just happened in a really kind of crazy way where we separated and went from like at the door of engagement to complete radio silence over just the course of a few days.
Whoa.
And I was so much pain and confusion, so I started writing music about it. But I started writing music about it from this place of like, how do I connect with others that might be feeling this way? as opposed to like, how do I document my sadness? And I can play those pieces today, like with great love and joy, even though they're sad. They're sad and joyful. You know, it's kind of like the ending of a movie where everyone's crying and they're not really sure if they're happy or sad. They're just like, I'm feeling, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the method and the intention, it's very much about intention. The intention that you're putting in to the piece as you're crafting it is very much the reality and the continuance of that piece.
So your superpower for connecting to feeling in the music that you're creating, is that only specific to you, or are you producing with other artists and you're able to kind of get them into those spaces as well? Is that part of your unique skill?
I certainly hope so. I do feel like when I'm producing another artist, my intention is to really understand at an essence level what it is they're trying to communicate or what it is that they're trying to manifest with this piece and pull that out. And, you know, like I would say like a form level would be like somebody saying, I really want strings, or I really want this to sound like Billie Eilish. And on the essence level, it's like, I want this song to feel very vulnerable. And I want this song to feel like that memory of your grandmother that stays with you. And that can look like strings, or it can sound like Billie Eilish. But if you distill the essence first and then pull from the essence into form, then you're able to act like bring that emotion out. So when I'm working with other artists, I try to understand the musical language that they're speaking, and then almost immediately migrate to what it is they're trying to say on an essence level and pull that out. I would say it's impossible to not mix some of your own in there.
Yeah.
But the good thing about having had so many mental health struggles over the years is like there's not a whole lot that I don't relate to.
Yeah.
I'm pretty compassionate and empathic. Like I have a client who wrote a song about, I can't actually describe what the song's about, but like the feeling I got when I heard the song was sort of that feeling I was talking about of just tears without really knowing where it's coming from. And I was like, I know exactly how to get this, you know, and used some strange instruments and some really weird approaches. But as soon as I played it for her, she was like, I'm crying. I was like, sweet,
Whoa.
mission accomplished.
Yeah.
We did it.
It sounds like you're pretty in touch with your emotional experience as a whole. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel emotions and I feel comfortable with those emotions now. I'm not scared of my fear or my sadness. I sort of see there's like a light Nate and a dark Nate, right? And I have to let them coexist in order to fully experience my experience. Only recently have I been willing to allow dark Nate to show up, because dark Nate's terrifying. You know, dark Nate's like, why don't we like get a bunch of drugs and jump off a bridge? I'm like, that's bad, dark Nate. Let's take it back a couple steps. Let's just
hang out for a bit.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask you was, does the addiction cravings, you know, that's still in the back of your mind somewhere with dark Nate, I guess, those still exist?
I would say that addiction is a huge part of my experience, for sure. Like there's something that I'm addicted to at all times. Like I just quit vaping a couple weeks ago, and that was like really hard. You know, I'm doing these Zens, which are not better than vaping, but it's quitting vaping, you know. So those are going to be quit pretty soon too. But there's something that I'm quitting at all times. But there's also like I feel like the beauty or the gift of substance use addiction is that it sheds light on the proliferation of addiction in the human experience, because everything has the potential to be addicting. You know, I mean, literally everything. The way that you communicate with your cat, like there's addictive patterns in that too.
I would say that like every single one of us is addicted, like to our phones. Like, are you kidding? Like,
The substance use addiction is an aggressive and ugly version of addiction, but a lot of people who migrate from active addiction to some form of freedom from it express gratitude for it, because it's sort of like you can't deny it. You know, it's actively killing you on a physical level, and so you have to face it, and it gives you the ability to have a frame of reference for addictive tendencies in the rest of your life. And the exercises that one goes through in moving through addiction and finding sovereignty in your experiences is kind of the point to me. I find myself in my relationships and in my professional activities, even in the work that I do, constantly having like cyclical thoughts. Like I have self-doubt every single time that I start a new project. You know, it doesn't matter how if the last project I did was like wildly successful. I get a new project. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I suck. You know,
Oh,
why am I
man.
doing this? I should just die. And then I work through that. And I have a method now for working through things as a result of my substance use addiction. So
Can I ask what that is?
it's less like of a checklist and more of like a check-in. If I notice anxiety building up or I notice fear, like I see those things for what they are now. I'm able to have an objective awareness of myself. And if I see myself, you know, reaching for the Zens like impulsively multiple times through the day, I'm like, oh, okay, that's not a choice. So let's chill out on that. Or if I'm starting the piece and I'm feeling self-doubt and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, well, what do I know? I know like I can open up a session and I can create some markers for where the verse begins, the chorus starts, you know, the stops.
Yeah.
Just like really basic fundamental steps, you know, coping mechanisms in a way. And those checkpoints give a little bit of traction or a little bit of foundation for the next checkpoint.
Yeah. Objects in motion stay in motion.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Mhm.
I like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I could use a little bit of that. Like
Yeah.
start small and build from that momentum, because it's really hard to kick off, and those negative emotions that spin up in that spot can be really debilitating. So
Absolutely.
it's cool to hear your
Mhm.
process.
One thing I really wanted to ask you, Nate, was so you're opening for Blue October tonight, right?
I am, yeah, with this band Nolo.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting for sure.
What is that experience like? Just like hours or minutes leading up to you having to, you know, walk out on stage? Like, is there a lot of anxiety, nervousness, or are you just at peace with it all?
Oh man, there's a ton of anxiety and nervousness. I think if there wasn't any, then I would be concerned because it's like, what?
Yeah.
You know, like I do see the anxiety. There's a beautiful side to it, which is there's something that I really care about here. And if I'm able to allow Dark Nate to feel the anxiety, then I'm able to let Light Nate understand what it is that is important about that. And then maybe transition focus and energy over there, which is kind of why that like binary balance is important. Because if it's just, I feel anxiety, I need to stop anxiety, then I might miss the lesson in the anxiety. I don't know that I have yet identified a method for appropriately handling anxiety and fear surrounding performance, because most of the performances that I do are pretty unique. Like this band that I'm playing with tonight for Blue October is called Nolo, and I just joined them literally like a few weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, this will be the first time that I've done this with them. And so it's a brand new kind of anxiety. And the last time I did a large performance was at South by Southwest, a festival here in Austin. And I played by myself, like all this new music that I'd written, and I'd never performed it before anyone before. And so that was its own anxiety. You know, I think there's like a fine balance of trying to do a little bit of creative visualization of success, but also just a tiny bit, and mostly just trying to stay in the present moment and really engage with the world around you in a tactile way even. But I'll report back and let you know if I come up with a better solution, because I definitely had some wild dreams last night about playing some weird stuff that would definitely not fly. All the ex-girlfriends were showing up and being like, "You suck."
Wait, these were dreams last night?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh no, it was a weird night.
That's
man.
not typical, is it?
No.
Okay.
No. I think it
Dreams
just
are a
means-
whole other thing I want to talk about at some point, but like,
Oh yeah, man. Last night's dreams rocked me. I'm still like barely here, so appreciate you guys indulging me.
Appreciate
Yeah,
you indulging us.
Yeah.
What's your, like, what are you playing? Are you singing or playing instruments for the band?
Tonight I'm singing and playing guitar, a song that I wrote called "Run" that we just released, and then
I just listened to that on your
Oh,
Spotify.
nice.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you for listening. We're doing that song along with 4 or 5 other of their songs. My like more permanent role in that group lives somewhere between guitar, synthesizers, singing, and producing. Like I'm sort of like that thing I was talking about earlier about kind of pulling the emotional essence out of the thing. It's sort of what my goal is with them, because they make great music, but the lineup is shifting, and I think there's a specific kind of energy that's happening in this orbit and this shift, and I'm like, oh, let's pull it. Let's make something real special.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what the final form of this looks like. We're sort of still in like the caterpillar soup stage. You know what I'm talking about? Like when the caterpillar becomes soup before it becomes a butterfly.
Yeah.
Metamorphosis.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that stuck out to me with what you were describing earlier with the anxiety of performing was the lesson in anxiety. And I feel like what a lot of men typically do is like, if they are feeling an emotion, emotions are difficult, and being vulnerable about those emotions is also, it has its own difficulty. But instead of, blocking out and being like, I don't want to feel that, it feels like you are more apt to let that emotional experience in and kind of do a little bit more of a discovery of like what it is that feeling or emotion is trying to tell you. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that connects to the sort of the gift of the addiction stuff is the aggressiveness of the negative parts and the anxieties of my life looked like in active addiction were so monumental that I couldn't ignore them. Like I was forced into facing them, forced into accepting them, understanding them, moving through them. And so in my experience today, when I feel fears, anxieties, pain, like I'm hyper aware of the fact that those are basically a mask for something. And I can either numb them, pretend they don't exist, or face them. And there's always going to be a moment where they have to be faced. It's just now or later,
And is it going to be easier to face it now, or is it going to be, a monster of a thing or a mountain to climb, the next time that you try to face it?
And it's always harder later. Like quitting vaping, for instance, I had a meeting with a Netflix director for a documentary that they asked me to compose music to, and I hadn't worked on anything for Netflix yet, and I was like, oh my god, this is so exciting. But I had just set the intention to quit vaping, and I got this call, and they're like, can you meet him in like an hour? And I'm like, yes. And I'm like, oh crap, I just quit vaping. I want to vape right now because I'm nervous. And I was like, oh, but see, this is the opportunity. Like, if I don't use the energy of this moment to like assist with the quitting of this, then I'm going to have to summon that energy again in some other place later. So even though it was really hard to accept that it was going to happen right then, I knew that by accepting it, it would kind of like supercharge, like nitrous oxide, the quitting aspect.
Damn.
Yeah, because then the next time something came up that you were nervous about, then it's that much easier to grab that crutch, right?
Right, exactly. Well, there's that aspect to it too, is if I come up with a reason why now is not the time, then I'm just like adding that info into the bank of now's not the time.
Super amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. How often have you like shared your whole experience and done something like this? Like, what was this like for you to talk about it? And this is going to be publicly broadcasted out to the world. And that,
First off, to answer the second part of that question, this was a lot of fun. It was really like I've done a few of these like podcasts where I'm talking about the story to a degree, but it usually is typically more focused on addiction and kind of, I don't know, there's a little bit of a fascination in the sobriety world of what we call war stories, which is like, you think that was messed up? Like, I remember this one time, which is, that stuff can be fun, but I appreciated the way that you all, like, you asked great questions, and there were so many times where I was wanting to hear you talk more. It's definitely getting a little burnt out listening to myself talk.
You have a really fascinating story, and you deliver it very well too. It's clear that you've done a lot of reflection on your experiences, and obviously we've only chatted for an hour, but it seems like you're in a good place, and it's been super fun just catching up with you again because it's been so long. So,
the feeling's mutual. I love what you guys are doing here, and Blair was telling me about it. It like made me feel very warm and enamored is the wrong word, but I knew you guys in college, and I hadn't really engaged with you since, and knowing that a group of guys from colleges was working on something like this together, it made me feel like we closed the loop, like we're all kind of working on similar things, thinking about similar things, and it's just very endearing. That's what I was looking for. Not enamored, but endearing.
Wow,
I'm endeared to you all.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate that. And are you in therapy now?
I am. Yeah, actually, I was on one right before we started. So.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's what
amazing.
Makes
It
sense.
was all about my cat this morning. We're talking about anxiety being a lesson farm. Like, my cat is like 10 lesson farms.
Oh man,
can't even imagine having 8 children. What the fuck is wrong with that?
Oh my god,
I know.
That is next level.
Yeah, oh, my parents were
I
crazy.
feel like with 8 children, you just got to let go of control completely, because that's like,
absolutely.
That's some caterpillar soup right there.
Yeah. Well, super, super appreciate you doing this. One of the benefits of you coming on here is people will hopefully be able to relate to your experience in some capacity and learn from your vulnerability. So really appreciate it. And is there any last bit of, if someone did relate to your experience, is there any last bit of advice you would give them or a takeaway as encouragement for someone maybe going through something similar?
I would say that for me, I talked about form and essence earlier with the song stuff about like finding the essence of the thing and the forms being the, you know, the Billie Eilish and strings. I didn't really clear it up if somebody's just hearing this part, but we'll zoom back. Form and essence, right? In a weird way, even though the essence maybe arguably is the real point, the form is also equally important in the sense that it helps access essence. Because I'm at a point now where I can experience fear and I can experience anxiety and recognize that there's something on the other side of those that needs to be investigated. I need to have patience with those moments and not avoid them in order to get to the lesson. But it took me a while to get to this place, and something that helped me and that continues to help me are prescribed forms. One being a daily gratitude list, because my tendency is to wake up in the morning and like literally at second one, like just begin stressing about whatever, you know, the day is going to look like, and allocating at least 30 minutes, preferably more, to stillness and reflection and kind of like connecting to the essence of yourself. And I do that with a gratitude list. I do it with reading, meditation. But for me, it's first thing in the morning because it kind of sets the pace for which, like the mania or the panic, and maybe it sets a pace so that those things don't necessarily happen.
Yeah.
Like advocating for stillness in your experience and advocating for patience with yourself and really communicating to yourself the way you would communicate to somebody else. Like I'm somebody who, you know, will put a dirty fork in the clean dishwasher and be like, you fucking moron.
That
And an
critic.
exercise that I use is like, would I tell this to my mom, you know? And if my mom did that and I called her a moron, like that'd be pretty sociopathic or psychopathic. So I think the language with which we communicate with ourselves is extremely important to our ability to trust ourselves enough to do the work, like to do the self-nurturing, right? So it's kind of long-winded, but like allowing stillness and then having some form-related things to encourage the more gentle side of yourself to come out, like the self-mother, maybe.
That does make sense, and it's such good advice.
Yeah, the inner self-critic is one that we all fight with, and finding a way to kind of like soothe that, and I like the way you put that, like setting the pace for the day, so you don't let the mania grab a hold before you can even, you know, get your feet on the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Nate, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man.
People want to
Thanks for
find you on
having me.
Spotify. It's Nathaniel Earl, correct?
Correct.
Cool.
Correct.
Yeah. So make sure to check him
We
out.
can
Amazing
drop
music.
a link in the description of the video as well.
Hell yeah. Appreciate you guys.
Awesome. And good luck tonight.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, good luck,
Thanks so
man.
much.
Let us know how it goes.
I will.
sure.
Most definitely. Well, thanks for having me so much, y'all. Really appreciate it. Good to see you again.